Okay, well, today we are here to talk about Fallen Star, which is the debut novel from I.G. Peters, and it was released in August of 2024, 350 pages. I don't think that there's an age range specified, but it's probably like an adult book, a book suitable for adults. There's some gore and violence in it. It's told in third person limited, but there's like some head hopping that goes along in a few spots. And this is not only is this the debut novel, it's also the first in a series of three novels. There's a sequel out right now, and there's a third book coming out at some point, I think over the summer. So I think that settles the introduction here. Let's see. So for the setting, I almost forgot the genre. It's a thriller. Sorry about that. Okay, now for the setting, it takes place in London in the present day. It's really more of like the greater London area. There's some parts of the story in which, I'm sorry, let me adjust my microphone a little bit. There's some points in the story that occur in the greater London area, and it's really, I guess, just more of like in England is probably the best way to put it. I'm not really familiar with the geography, so I'll just leave it at there. So let's see. Guess that's really all there is for the setting. Although I should mention before I move on to the next thing, just like I mentioned in my Substack review, it really explores a lot of different parts of London. So it's like, there's some not so nice areas, there's some nicer areas. I mean, I think there's even a scene that's in Parliament. So it really does a good job of using London to like the maximum that it can be used. Like it's like every part of the city seems to be in use. Although admittedly, I haven't been there, so I'm not sure I can tell you for certain. Now, for the characters, there's three POVs. One of the POVs is almost kind of like shared between two characters because the first POV is Denton, and he's a photographer. And the second POV is Mira and Karak. It's really more of like Mira's POV, but Karak is in a lot of it, and he definitely features a lot into that plot and that storyline. And then the last one is Crispin. Now, all these characters I found very interesting because in England, I guess, like social class is like a really big deal, and they all come from like different backgrounds. Denton is like a very poor working class British guy, or I guess bloke, as they say over there, and he works as a paparazzi, and he seems to be kind of trying to escape his past. Mira is the daughter of an immigrant family, and she really struggles to sort of like find where she feels like she struggles to find a sense of belonging, I think. And her particular arc I thought was really interesting. Her and Karak seem to get along pretty well. Uh, Crispin is like a very upper class, pretty arrogant. I mean, in a lot of ways, he's like the villain of this story. And whereas Mara and Karak are pursuing the truth, Crispin is actually like his whole storyline is he's seems to be trying to kind of hide it for his own personal ambition and gain. It's interesting in that there's these good arcs that are present really in representing kind of like the past and the future. And I think really Crispin represents like the past, but also kind of like tradition, and the other characters seem to be more about progress. There's a character who's kind of a villain in the story called the Crown Prince. He's not a POV character, but he's kind of like an antagonistic force, him and his guard or bodyguards. And it is kind of interesting how uh, he's like, I don't know how to say this. I guess really I'll talk about that more in the themes, but the only other thing for characters I have here is that there was a character that was an American named Jimmy, and Jimmy did kind of remind me of Americans, primarily Texans that I know. So I did kind of like that character. So let's see. Now on the plot. So this particular, like the plot of this book, in a lot of ways reminded me of some films and movies that I've seen in the past. The premise, like the setup to me, kind of reminded me of this movie called The Conversation, starring Gene Hackman, or I guess I should say the late Gene Hackman, may he rest in peace. It came out back in the 70s. There's also parts of it that kind of reminded me of like The Fugitive. Uh, there's a television show, like, well, I don't know how many of you know this, but like, 24, MI6, and then like the films, the Jason Bourne films, like the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, and the Bourne Ultimatum. Like there's facets of those stories, I think. Well, I don't want to say that they're like facets of it. I guess I should just say that like the way the story and the plot moved reminded me of elements from those films and television shows. And so I think that if you like those films or those television shows, you are more likely to like this particular book. Uh, Another thing it reminded me of a few times in a few spots was there was this old British show called Ultimate Force, which was about like the Special Air Service, and some of the action scenes kind of reminded me of that particular TV show. But if you like those TV shows, those movies, you're probably going to like this book. And if you like this book, you might like those films and those television shows. So that's probably worth mentioning. For most thrillers, of course, the plot's going to be rather essential. It's going to be like a huge. It's really what drives the story forward. There's a good characterization here. It's a good mix of like the characters making choices and then the plot kind of evolving around that. They rely on each other in a way that I think is pretty good because a lot of people are like, well, is it a plot driven or a character driven thing, type of story or book. In this case, they're kind of like woven together in a way that I think works pretty well. Let me see what else I got here. The only other thing I have noted here is there's a lot of UK humor, and honestly, I had to Google things a few times because there's like, British terms and such that like I don't fully understand. Uh, but most of them were Googleable, so I mean, it's not like it's gonna hold you up or anything. So I guess that's really all I got for the plot. Let me move on to themes. So the themes were pretty good for an action thriller. Primarily, I think there were like two themes that were sort of like working out along the way through these character arcs. And one, of course, was Mira trying to find like where she belonged and not feeling she felt kind of out of place in some ways, and she kind of found like a group of people that I guess you could say it's like she found her home in a way through the story, and I thought that was really well done. The other thing is that there's like the idea of tradition versus progress, and I don't know what it is about. Well, I don't know. I don't live in the UK, but there's an old saying that in the United States, 100 years is a really long time, and in Britain, 100 miles is a really far distance. And I understand that pretty well because I live in Texas, and like to go from like El Paso to Houston takes like almost more than a day really of driving, unless you want to not sleep. Uh, but there's just something about England and tradition where it's like it just seems like it's a really strong influence, and you have sort of this evolving culture and this evolving group of people over time that are like they're not stuck in the past, but they seem to want to honor it. And so you have different characters that seem to embody those different nuances of the past versus the future. And I think I have another note here about it, but I think that I'm actually going to save that for the spoiler section. So I guess that's really all I have for the themes here. They're not like, well, no, I guess that's pretty much everything. Like the themes are pretty good. Like for an action thriller, it's really well done. Let's see. So for the Inside the Author Studio, I.G. Peters, let's see, according to his Goodreads page, and he is trying to entertain readers. And he's written this spy series. He also has a science fiction series out called, I think it's Loch, but it's spelled like the Scottish way, kind of like Loch Ness, like Loch, instead of not Loch as in like Lock. Um, but admittedly, I'm really bad with names, so I'd have to double check on that. But the sci-fi series, I think, is more like a very serious, like detective type story, which is like that's what I write. So I'm actually kind of curious about that. Let's see. I think I have something here. What is it? Oh, the critique section. So just as a like, just to cover all the bases here, there's like a way that most of us write dialogue tags, and I think here they're done like a little bit differently. Like instead of commas, like periods are used a lot, and it seemed a little weird, but I kind of got used to it. Um, I think that's really all I had in terms of like the the grammar being like a little bit off. But it's still readable. It's still a good story and a good book. But I just put that out there because I think people have, they should know before they buy the book. No surprises or anything. And my conclusion is, it's good. Now on to spoilers. Okay, so at the end, Crispin definitely gets what he deserves. I thought that was pretty nice. Let's see here. The whole storyline about really like the plot elements of like truth versus lies, like the Crispin trying to stay ahead of everything and keep everything hidden. It reminded me of that quote from I think it's Edgar Moan, which is I don't know if I'm saying that right, but lies have speed, but truth has endurance, and I think that's really like a well, I think that's really accurate based upon what I've seen in real life. Like eventually the truth does come out, and it was kind of gratifying for Crispin to get his, I guess you would say, comeuppance. I don't know if that's the right word. But the in terms of the themes, the Crown Prince was really more of a reformist, and yet Crispin was a traditionalist. But at the same time, it was really their ambition that actually kind of uh, kept their, I guess you could say, untenable alliance together for a while. But I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was really interesting that there was a minor plot point at the end where Carrick mentions that with the crown prince being ousted and no longer heir to the throne of a foreign country, he is now going to be replaced by someone who's like a real hardliner, like a real anti reform type of guy. And so there's that interesting question always of like, well, what's really the greater good? And justice may prevail, but have they actually done something far worse? I thought it was an interesting question. I imagine that's probably going to come up with the sequel, but I don't really know. Let's see. I thought it was interesting that Denton is trying to escape his past, but as a paparazzi, he's actually taking pictures of celebrities doing compromising things, effectively trapping them in their own mistakes and their own what becomes their past. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on things. Uh, let's see. I think that's really all I had here. So I guess that's all I have for the spoiler section. So if you like thrillers, I think that you're gonna like this book. If you like those television shows or those films I mentioned earlier, I think you'll like this book. It's at 350 pages. It's a good length to it. It's not like a quick read, but it's not like really long, like some books like mine. um, but yeah, it's not bad. In fact, it's pretty good. So I guess that's the end of the review. So that's all, y'all, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.